Welcome to the 8th episode of the Force Geeks, a Star Wars podcast where X-Wing marks the spot, and brought to you by DailySuperhero.com, where you can find focus coverage on movies, TV content, and more for Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Ghostbusters. New episodes dropping on Mondays. We appreciate you joining us, and this is a relatively new podcast, so those folks trying us out, those who've been hanging out with us, we sure do appreciate you doing that, and there are a lot of options to talk about Star Wars, and we are so very thankful that you chose to be a part of our experience, our journey. Please do us the courtesy of hitting that subscribe option to help support us. And we now have listeners on 5 continents, and love that our passion for the galaxy far, far away is going the distance here on this planet. So cool about that. I'm Nate Custer, coming to you from Northwest Arkansas, or NWA as we call it around here. And I am joined by my fellow Force Geek, Jake Scott, who is now back home in the Seattle area from his holiday travels. Jake, Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year to you, brother. How are you?
Good. Feeling good. Celebrated Life Day like Chewie would, so I'm feeling good about that. Starting off 2020, talking about Star Wars. Doesn't get any better than that, you know?
No, it does not. Absolutely.
So we have a lot of stuff to talk about, as we always do. And frankly, this last week has shocked me how much Star Wars news we're getting.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of this is rumor mill stuff, though, so you have to take that for what it's worth. So we're going to get into a whole bunch of rumors are breaking that, frankly, if any of them are true, I'm super excited about this. So here's what we have coming up on the show. We now know when we get new episodes of the Clone Wars series coming to us on Disney+. We'll talk about that release date and what we might see in the new episodes, as well as what it all means for the Star Wars universe. Plus, speaking of Star Wars animated series, there is some news breaking about a new series focused on Luke Skywalker, and another about what happened to Ezra Bridger from Rebels, because we've all been asking questions about where the heck is Ezra? What happens with all those people? There's a lot of great characters that we want to know what happens to them, and the last we saw them, it was a few years after the Battle of Endor. So what happened to him? He just disappeared with the space whales, and then he's gone. So we're going to find out about that. Also, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, the JJ cut. What's the deal with that? Is it legit? Does it exist? Will we ever see it? I don't know. We're going to talk about that, too. And so much is being made about Rose Tico in Episode 9, or rather, the lack of Rose in Episode 9. We're going to dig into that. And finally, our friends at the official Star Wars fan club group on Facebook posed an interesting question about good old Palpatine. His return, when there's a lot of talk about whether or not it was a good choice to make to end the Skywalker Saga. We'll go and get into what people said, because there was a lot of votes in this. And again, it's a great Facebook group. If you haven't joined it already, you really should. The official Star Wars fan club group. A lot of fun stuff going on. They have a ton of content. Jake, let's get right into things immediately, because I want to just go for this. Clone Wars, the release date, Monday, February 17th, Disney+. You're a fan of the series. I'm a fan of the series. Disney did not know just how much people loved the Clone Wars, canceling it when they bought Star Wars from, good old godfather of Star Wars, George Lucas. So once they bought Lucasfilm, one of the first things they did was they got rid of it. I was floored at that point. But to be honest with you, I had not really gotten into it. You told me about it. I watched the movie at one point. I was like, the one that came out that introduced Clone Wars. The movie I still cannot get behind. It wasn't great, but it started things out for the Clone Wars. Now, what is it you think that people are going to be most excited about with the return of the Clone Wars? Because there's a lot of story arcs, but one of the things I loved about the Clone Wars is they extended the mythology. What is it about the Clone Wars that you think people are going to look forward to seeing?
Well, I would say it's probably 2 things for me, especially. One of the things, like you said, is the mythology and just how deep the Clone Wars really got. I mean, they explored a ton of territory in that series that, even if you're really familiar with the EU and Star Wars as well in general, like I am, they still got a lot of content out there for you of background and stuff that you might not have gotten any other way. Also, of course, obviously, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin. I mean, they're like the dynamic trio, and having them back together again will be epic. And also seeing Asajj Ventress come back, if that can happen at some point, would be very cool.
Also, the Clone Wars gave us more Darth Maul. Maul was such a very popular character, and of course, this is science fiction. It's a show about space wizards and laser swords. The fact that people can exist after they've been cut in half, cleaved in half, like Darth Maul, you gotta suspend your disbelief. You got to suspend your disbelief and just go with it. There's no explosions in space. There's no sound in space, but we get them all the time. There's no fire in space. It needs oxygen to burn. Just get rid of your thoughts on what makes sense and doesn't, because Star Wars does not compute when it comes to what makes sense with physics or any of that. So just go with it. The guy was cut in half. He survived, but the Maul story arcs were so much fun from Clone Wars, and I kind of hope that we see more, because we know he's still gallivanting around the galaxy, because Solo is a time period that we saw that movie come out that was beyond the Clone Wars era, many years actually past that time frame, and he's out there running some crime syndicate. So I would love to see Maul come back.
That would be pretty cool. I mean, and it's interesting that you say, suspend your disbelief and stuff. Something I've really gotten into lately that if you guys haven't checked it out, and you would like this a lot, YouTube channel called Because Science with Kyle Hill, the guy, the discount Thor with the long hair.
Yes.
Yeah. He talks a lot about the science of Star Wars, and laser swords got me thinking about it, because that's like one of his nitpicky things about George Lucas and lightsabers and everything. But anyway, you should check it out. But yeah, I think getting Maul back would be really cool, because he was just such an intriguing character, because he was so broken and flawed in so many ways, and yet still managed to cause trouble for so many people.
Absolutely. And I just actually watched a couple clips from the Clone Wars, because the Darksaber is a very popular topic right now, because of seeing that at the end of The Mandalorian, what that means, what it signifies, where has it been, how did Moff Gideon get a hold of it. I went back and watched that episode where you see that Darth Maul takes control of Mandalore, and he gets the Darksaber by battling Pre Vizsla, which is voiced by Jon Favreau, who created The Mandalorian. And Jon Favreau's work, if you're not familiar with him, I mean, the guy really, you can't do any better when you're looking at making a major blockbuster of a film, a TV show, or what have you, because the guy gave us Iron Man. He's done some great work for Disney on a lot of stuff, and he's given us The Mandalorian now. He's a proven commodity. It's just a matter of time before Disney has to think, we got to get him involved with a directorial of a Star Wars movie. The guy gets it. He loves Star Wars. But it's cool to see this stuff. And Clone Wars has given us a lot of that expansion of stories. It gets in depth. And you really, if you were iffy on the prequels with Anakin Skywalker, I liked it. I wasn't huge on the prequels, but particularly I loved Revenge of the Sith. I enjoyed Attack of the Clones. It was just the Phantom Menace I wasn't that into. But if you want to know more about Anakin Skywalker and why it was such a huge thing that he switched the dark side, watch the Clone Wars series. If you haven't done it yet, you got to watch that, Jake. And I know that you were a big proponent of it.
Oh yeah, that really fleshes out Anakin as the flawed person that he was, and shows why the Jedi Council was so reluctant to train him being as old as he was, because he had so many scars, metaphorically speaking, that they knew were going to cause his troubles, that eventually Palpatine was able to use to twist him. So, I mean, Clone Wars was awesome. There's just no doubt about it. I'm a little bummed that it's coming as fast as it is, because I've been working my way through Rebels, trying to binge watch. Now I'm going to have to switch, because I can't finish them both in time. And there's a lot of Clone Wars to watch before it comes out again. But I can live with my disappointment.
There's good news on that front, because it's going to be a limited run. There's not a ton of new episodes coming, which is good and bad news. So we're going to get a limited run, not like the full, 22 to 24 that we got with the original series. It's going to be more like what we saw with that Netflix version of season 6, a limited amount of episodes. But there is a rumor going at this point, and I think it's worth mentioning, because they're looking to see what the reception is to Clone Wars for season 7. So this is a big deal, simply because the fact that if it does well, there is a thought initially that this was going to close out the entire series and give us that closure we were looking for before you get the final movie of the prequel era, which was Revenge of the Sith, that this would lead into that. I don't know if that's still the case or not at this point, and if it is, I don't know how they continue making more episodes, because Revenge of the Sith shows us the fall of Anakin, so I don't know how you can do any more than that. Perhaps they can continue some of the different story arcs that are going on with Ahsoka, with Obi-Wan Kenobi going off to Tatooine at that point, Yoda on Dagobah. I don't know what they could do, or perhaps they go into those other Jedi that escaped after the Purge. So there's a lot to say with that. But apparently, the rumor mill is going, and this is a lot of this coming from 4chan conversations. If you're not familiar with that, take it with a grain of salt of how much truth there could be to this. But apparently, Disney and Lucasfilm are waiting to see how warm the reception is for Clone Wars Season 7. If it's a big success, which I think it's going to be. If it's a big success, that they are thinking about extending it going on. Lucasfilm, when they took over, as I mentioned before, was told to shut down. When Disney took over Lucasfilm, told to shut down operations. They laid off their staff from the animators. I mean, it was really something else. Dave Filoni basically was one of the only people left from that whole division, and thank God
Yeah,
Disney didn't
thank
get rid of
God.
him, because
No joke.
he is really just one of the saviors of the Star Wars that we knew.
The Star Wars legacy.
Yeah, I mean, as we've said many times on this podcast, he studied at the knees and feet of George Lucas, the great one.
Yep.
Like him or hate what he did with the prequels and where he might have gone with the sequel trilogy,
Yeah.
George is the one who started it all, and that's who Dave
Absolutely.
Filoni learned it from.
Well, all hail Saint Dave. You know,
Absolutely.
That's really what it comes down to. He's really been our savior in a lot of ways.
And it sounds like we might see a lot more from Dave at this point. They're talking about more series. With the success of The Mandalorian being the most popular TV show in the world, I think Disney is thinking maybe it's okay if we don't make a lot of movies. Star Wars may become more of a TV property. If that's the case, I can live with that. I still want movies. I want the big screen experience, because I can't imagine getting Episode 9 only on TV and not getting the chance to see it in a movie theater. I want that experience.
Well, the thing I would have to say about that is, and going back just a second, I mean, obviously the mouse can make mistakes, and they made a couple. You know, throwing out the EU, you know, throwing out Clone Wars, all that stuff that was turned out to be so beloved by so many people. But this is Disney we're talking about, and this is Star Wars we're talking about. Make movies. Make a movie every year. Make 2 every year. Make 5 shows at a time. It doesn't matter. You will always find people to star in them, happily, probably for half price. You will always find people willing to write and direct it, and you will always find people who are more than happy to buy it and watch it and pay for it. So why not make more? You know, I mean, and ultimately that's what Disney's about, is making money. Well, it's like a bottomless pit of money that you can just dive into. Star Wars is. Just come on, let's go.
I'm going to pick a bone with you on one topic.
Sure.
You will always find people to write and direct Star Wars.
Okay, I get where you're going here.
The fandom, we can be pretty malicious and mean when we get something we don't like.
True.
I have definitely unloaded on stuff I didn't like. Now, I would say that I love Star Wars, and so even if I'm getting something I don't like or wish hadn't gone that direction, I still am thankful I got more Star Wars. But if you're going to write and direct, let's be real about this. If you sign on to that project, it is a volatile ride you're about to go on. Will the fandom respond to you? Will you even get a chance to see your project see the light of day? Will you complete filming of your own movie if that's the case? It is a dangerous zone to be in, and I think truly that the Game of Thrones guys were worried about that as well, as was Disney. I think Game of Thrones guys were fired. I think that they were okay with it because they saw what happened with the turn of fans on what happened after Episode 8 with Rian Johnson. And on top of that, they saw their own series ending get hit with some snags from fans and seeing that people were ticked off because people get very passionate about this stuff. So maybe they were like, we're cool with not being a part of this anymore. I think that there's a lot of pressure on writers and directors to come on board. Chris Terrio, for instance, who wrote Episode 9 along with J.J. Abrams, the guy's an Oscar winner. He wrote Argo, which is arguably one of the greatest films of the last decade because of...
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay, go ahead.
I said it was arguably. I'll point it out. I said arguably.
Well, we can argue about that later.
Yeah. But it was a fantastic movie, and it was a very deep movie. And that guy took a step away from writing something like that to take on Star Wars. How much pressure can you put on yourself when it comes to taking on that sort of a commodity? I mean, Star Wars is huge. You're talking about people's childhood memories, new ones. So that is a tremendous amount of pressure. So I think there might be people who would say, like, you know what? I appreciate the offer. I'm good. I'm not going to do this. I don't want to open myself up to that.
Well, what they need to do is just go on a hiatus from social media for a couple of years after the movie comes out, and then they'll be good.
Good point. Good point.
And honestly, couldn't we all do a little better off with less time on social media as it is?
You know what? You've got a great point. And actually, something since I took a step away from working in television news is I am not on social media nearly as much as I used to be. I feel so much better. But that also comes at a price. I'm not doing nearly enough with our own social media for this podcast. I got to do a lot more, and I haven't been doing it. So I'll work on that. And folks, if you're listening and you're looking at our social media, I apologize. I got to step up my game. Back to the shows. So when we last left Ezra Bridger, we know that he's gone. Space Whales took him off someplace with Thrawn, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and then you've got Ahsoka Tano and Sabine Wren going off to find him. There is talks, and we actually got this from Cosmic Book News, so how reliable this is, again, I don't know. I like the site, but I don't know what is what. Rumors, again, and that's why we're prefacing this, rumors, are that they're going to do a Dave Filoni second series that is a sequel series to Rebels that focuses on what happened to Ezra Bridger, where he's been, what he's been doing out in the unknown regions. Could that tie into what the Emperor's been doing at this point? Because the Emperor was hanging out in the unknown regions, amassing his thousands upon thousands of Star Destroyers that can take out planets. Does it touch upon that? Another rumor mill that I didn't even mention off the top of the show, Grand Admiral Thrawn getting his own movie.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You know, if they cast the right guy for that, that'll be epic.
You know what I'm really disappointed about? Richard E. Grant played such a great role in the latest Star Wars movie in Episode 9. I think he would have made a fantastic Grand Admiral Thrawn.
That's a good thought.
It would have been phenomenal, and I hate that he has already been in it because I think he'd be the perfect pick for Grand Admiral Thrawn. That coolness that Thrawn possesses as the Chiss. And if you're not familiar with Grand Admiral Thrawn and you're a casual viewer, and there's nothing wrong with that, if you just like the Star Wars movies, that's cool, you're not familiar, and you haven't read the books, Grand Admiral Thrawn, those books are tremendous. Started by Timothy Zahn back in the 90s, wrote that sequel trilogy that was considered to be what happened after Return of the Jedi. It was legit what happened afterward until Disney, bought up the franchise and changed everything on us. So Grand Admiral Thrawn is a blue-skinned, red-eyed alien from the race of the Chiss. And super cool stuff. And so we saw that character come into play, cherry-picked from the expanded universe novels, which is now considered Star Wars Legends for all the stuff that was written, considered to be canon, and Disney bought it and said, hey, we're done with this. It's not canon anymore. We'll call it Star Wars Legends. Well, Thrawn is part of that, but he's been cherry-picked from the expanded universe novels to be a part of canon now. So what they do with Thrawn, who knows? But I want to see more Thrawn.
Oh, absolutely. And I've read all those books multiple times, and he is just a phenomenal villain that, has very few people you can compare him to. He's like Vader, but more logical, for sure. More controlled.
Just a phenomenal character. Very, very cool. Very cold and cunning and just incredibly smart. And just such a great match for the Jedi and for what the Jedi offer and bring to the table. Thrawn is like the ultimate chess player, playing 10 moves ahead of where you are. And that's what made him such a worthy adversary to Luke Skywalker in the old novels in the Thrawn trilogy, and has been a lot of fun in the new canon that's been introduced since then, and as well as in Rebels, too. So
yeah, he's really perfect for that role because of the fact that, he is cold and calculating and ruthless. And so in a lot of ways, he's the anti-Jedi, not a Sith. Because he's all about logic versus emotion, and he's under control at all times, but he's against what they're doing. So he's the anti-Jedi kind of guy. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see more of him for sure.
Me too. And here's a thought here. So they're talking about what the Game of Thrones guys were working on for Disney. It has been rumored multiple times that it was indeed a full trilogy of films that they were working on, and they were looking at potentially The First Jedi, but another thought that has come out has been an Old Republic film trilogy.
Yeah.
Which, how many of us want to see that? If you played the games, Knights of the Old Republic 1 or 2, you know how great those games were, specifically 1, but 2. Even though a lot of people were critical of it, saying that it was too rushed when it came out, I still loved playing that game. I would play it now.
Yep, absolutely. And the Old Republic, the Star Wars The Old Republic game that's still being played now, obviously the desire and the interest is there. It's like the World of Warcraft, but for Star Wars.
It's the perfect pairing, and it's great, and I would love to see that trilogy explore that. And if we get a series, I'm cool with it. If it's done like Game of Thrones in that kind of way, I am down for that. But I would love to see the movie theater version. I want to see it in a theater. I would even be cool if Disney started thinking about, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and take our Disney Plus shows and offer them up to the public to go see in a movie theater. Would you watch The Mandalorian in a movie theater? The series, if they were going to offer...
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would totally go pay for that. I would love to see
2 episodes at a time?
Yes, totally. I mean, the tickets can be cheaper because it's less time you're spending in the theater. Or you could say, we're going to run 3 here, and then another, month we'll release another 3 in the theater, and you can watch them all back to back to back like it's a movie. I would be down for that. I would love to see that in a movie theater.
That would be pretty epic, actually.
It would. It absolutely would. Can you think of a place where Disney has been successful beyond just looking at television or movies with their properties?
There's a couple video game tie-ins that they've done. Toys, obviously, theme parks, stuff like that.
What about Broadway?
Oh, boy, you're really out of my wheelhouse now. What about it?
Rumors are Disney is looking at pitching a Star Wars musical on Broadway.
Oh, boy.
I can't see this happening, but...
No.
But, that's not to say it couldn't happen. And again, straight from the rumor mill, I'm going off of cosmic book news. Not comic book news, cosmic book news.
Mm-hmm.
Take it with a grain of salt, but it could happen.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah,
maybe.
They're saying it would be focused on Rey and what happened after the events of Rise of Skywalker. And they're saying it would be titled Echoes of the Future.
Okay, well, if I could see Daisy Ridley doing it, then I'd be all about it, because she's epic. But, other than that, I don't know.
Disney, Broadway, Star Wars. The Lion King still ranks as one of the greatest shows on Broadway. People say it's an amazing experience, and that's been running for decades.
Well, it was one of the best Disney movies ever made, so...
Absolutely. So I can't picture Star Wars on Broadway. But if it was, I might have to go see my first Broadway show. I will admit I've not seen any Broadway shows. But
I haven't either.
That might be the first one I have to go see.
I've seen the Nutcracker on stage. That sort of counts, kind of.
Sort of?
Maybe.
Sort of? I don't know. We'll say it does.
It's kind of the same idea, just the wrong name for the stage.
All right, well, let's get into a really hot-button topic that has been all over the place this last week. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, the JJ cut. I'm really at a loss to this because I don't think Disney will ever release a JJ cut. Even George didn't do director's versions of his movies. He just went back and altered them. I mean, he did the special editions, but it was not really like that it changed the narrative of the movies at all. It was just additional effects. It was a couple of extra cutscenes or adding in a couple things that enhanced the story that laid the groundwork for the prequels to kind of make it like, oh, we're giving you a taste of what you'll see in the prequels. That's what it was all about. And just he wanted to tinker with his movies a little bit. The biggest narrative change was that Han didn't shoot first with the special editions, which we all know he did. Han shot first. And I loved what they did with Solo and showing that he shot first in that regard.
Yes.
Which was great. Moving into this area of a JJ cut, there's been a lot of talk that J.J. Abrams was forced to cut stuff that Disney came in and Lucasfilm came in the final moments. I don't see J.J. taking a contract where he would have given them that much power because J.J. is very controlling on those sorts of things. And I don't see him giving them final cut. I just don't see them. I don't think that he would do that. Whether he did or not, I don't know. It's Star Wars. It's a huge property. But from what I understand, they had to beg him to come back to help, make sure that this was a great way to end everything after everything fell through with Colin Trevorrow. So I'm curious.
Well, I mean, he's such an amazing director. I mean, I'm sure that he could easily, pull the kind of clout that you need to say, hey, I can come in and save your property for you. No problem,
But here's what you're going to give me.
He's good at it. Yeah, exactly. And it's obvious. I mean, he's done it before, with Star Trek, for example.
Yes.
So, and those movies were very well done. And I think that he did a great job when whatever he touched with Star Wars worked well. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see about that. I know that there's been a lot of talk about, what should have been there, what shouldn't have. And there's talk that one of my main gripes with Episode 9 was that we didn't get what I was hoping for, which is seeing Anakin Skywalker come back in as a Force ghost. I can't believe that wasn't done. And one of the things they're talking about with the JJ cut, as I use air quotes that you can't see right now, it just amazes me that they wouldn't have given us that because that was given to us in the original trilogy with the special editions that we saw Anakin Skywalker. In the original trilogy, it was not Hayden Christensen initially, but with the special editions, he was cut in. So I expected to see Hayden Christensen. Well, now they're saying that he apparently did shoot something in the flesh for Star Wars and that it got cut. And there's talk that, one, Disney came in and changed it, or for a variety of reasons, one of them being potentially that there were issues with callbacks and reshoots and getting everyone to be able to stand. But we initially thought we would see all of these characters from the various movies from the prequel era, the original trilogy, and see them in this, and it was disappointing to see that we didn't get those characters all standing. And they were talking about how Ahsoka Tano, because she's one of the voices that you hear, that apparently she would have been more in the shadows. The animated characters would have been standing more in the shadows, not to ruin any possibilities of different casting of those characters in the future for a Star Wars property, so it didn't seem confusing to see someone different, and you would have them shadowed. But Samuel L. Jackson, Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor, Luke Skywalker, Carrie would have had to have been obviously CG'd in, but all of these people, it would have been cool to have them there. And there's rumors that apparently because of the callbacks and the reshoots that they couldn't make it work entirely. They had shot some stuff, but they had to cut it because it didn't quite match up, what have you. If I'm Disney, I'm wanting to give fans what they had hoped to for that moment and go back and put it in for a special edition.
No joke. Well, and I think it's very interesting, all the big brouhaha that came around when Celebration came out, when they were going to have Ian McDiarmid and Hayden Christensen get up on stage and talk, and they ended up canceling at the last minute. Why? And it was before the movie was coming out, so there was a lot of talk that maybe they're involved and they don't want anything to be slipping. Well, we know why Palpatine was there and that we didn't want Ian McDiarmid getting something slipping.
Yeah,
why
it didn't make any sense why they were saying, okay, Hayden, Ian, you guys can't do this. You can't make these appearances. We don't want people talking about this, this whole Comic-Con thing you're about to go to. Sorry, you guys are done. You're off the board. You're off the panel. We're not doing this because I don't want to give anything away. I do think that something was shot with Hayden Christensen, and I do think there was some reason why it was not put into the movie. I don't know what that reason is, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to see Hayden Christensen more than I wanted to see Han Solo, and I know that's potentially blasphemous for some people out there to feel that way, but Hayden made more sense to see than Harrison Ford in this story. And the only reason, again, that I think that Harrison was there is because Carrie was dead, and they couldn't have her fulfill that role that needed to be done from a parental role for Ben Solo to bring him back. And I think since Carrie was gone, Harrison is the pinch hitter. But again, I would have much rather have had left it without that memory callback of Harrison Ford as Han Solo and had Hayden Christensen deal with Ben Solo. Because that whole time, tell me again, grandfather. Show me again, grandfather. He was thinking he was talking to his grandfather. And if his grandfather comes back and is like, dude, you've been talking to the Emperor? That's not me. Yeah. I brought balance to the Force. I did that. That's what's up, yo. I brought balance to the Force.
Yeah. I broke everything. See how well I did? Yeah,
I didn't dislike it.
I mean, I really liked the Harrison Ford thing like we talked about before. I hear you. I get it. I mean, he had the special place of being, the only family member that Ben murdered with his own hand. I mean, he did try to kill Leia, but he didn't succeed. Or actually, no, it wasn't him. It was his co-pilots that ended up shooting those torpedoes. But anyway, I get it. And I really do hope that we see, or at least hear, more later. We get more content, find out about why it was cut, that sort of thing, just for my curiosity's sake, if nothing else. But it would be really cool if they had done that scene at the end that I was talking about before with all the Force Ghosts lined up.
Can I talk to you about something else, too, that I think is really interesting here? And that is the fact that Rian Johnson, we've brought up a number of times, and we're going to talk about him in a moment because of the character he created in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, which is Rose Tico. He's still in play with Lucasfilm. I do think, as I talked with Daniel Wolf from dailysuperhero.com, that I think that him going back and forth with the fandom to some degree and engaging in some of those, I'm not going to call them disputes, but the heated conversations that have transpired, I think that puts him potentially in a bad spot with Disney to continue those confrontational aspects of his relationship with the fandom. But I still, even though I did not like the choices he made for much of that movie, I still think it was really well done, which I've said before, and I won't go into that anymore. But I do think it was really well done. I think he's a masterful storyteller. I think that he deserves to play in the Star Wars sandbox. I want to see him do more. But apparently there's thoughts that he has been waiting to see how Episode 9 was received before him looking at potentially returning to do more with Star Wars. And it doesn't sound like there really is as much beef as people have been trying to make with JJ and Chris Terrio versus Rian Johnson. I think that there's some things that probably Rian would not have liked that were done with Episode 9. He took Star Wars a very different direction, and the fandom reacted to that, but there was also a lot of people that really adored The Last Jedi and applauded that it went a different direction and broke away from expectations. And the guy took some chances, and a lot of people really liked what he did with it. I was not one of them, but I liked a lot, and I will say this. I have gone back to watch The Last Jedi. It doesn't impact me the same way it did without having seen Episode 9. It's somewhat Episode 9 because it gave me a lot that I did want, has made it easier for me to watch Episode 8, which I think is an important thing when you look at the trilogy as a whole. I actually enjoyed it a little bit more than I have in the past. I still get tired of the fact that all the main characters are broken up and not with each other. I think they're stronger together, and you get a much better film with them together, because that trio of Finn and Rey and Poe is really something special. I didn't like that he sidelined the droids in episode 8 as well with C-3PO and R2-D2. They were very unimportant players in that movie. And that was a disappointment, because the whole thing was that when George Lucas came up with this idea for the movies to begin with, the story was told through the eyes of the droids. And I really think he lost sight of that. That was an important aspect of Star Wars, that we always saw them involved somehow. And it really was a lot from their perspective, which is what made it interesting.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
I'm curious to see if he wants to come back to play in the sandbox again.
I would like that. I think that, like you said, he's extremely talented as a director, and I think that if you were to give him free reign with some new characters with very, very little limitation and just say, hey, let's see what you can do, it could be awesome. You know, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Star Wars is a huge galaxy, and there's no reason why everybody can't play in it at the same time.
Rose Tico. A lot of people are upset that she was in the film for like less than a minute and a half.
Minute and 16.
Which is disappointing. It's such a minuscule amount, and Dominic Monaghan, who is in this series as well, and if you're not familiar with him, he was in Lost. He was also in
Hobbit,
the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That's right. He was one of the Hobbits. And very great actor. Has been friends with J.J. Abrams for quite some time from their days on Lost. And J.J., put him in this movie because he said, I've got something for you. We didn't see a lot of him either. And he has come out and said in interviews, Dominic Monaghan has, that there were more scenes with him, with Rose Tico, that they wound up getting cut. J.J. cut? Maybe. I don't know. But he said there were more scenes, and it is a shame that those were cut. At the same time, it was a long movie. I would have been fine with a 3-hour movie, as I said last week. The Avengers was 3 hours. Why not do that with Star Wars? It's closing out the saga. Give it to us. I think we can handle 3 hours. That movie was fast-paced and was going. I did not realize how much time had passed and that it was just about to be over.
Yeah.
So they definitely could have done that, and I'm disappointed they didn't, because there's a lot of exposition that they had to cut out that would have helped explain things a bit more. Chris Terrio, the writer of Episode 9, has also expressed that. But Rose Tico, not in it a whole lot. It is disappointing in that regard. I like Kelly Marie Tran, who plays the character. I think she did a great job. I just didn't like her storyline in Episode 8. I wasn't against her as an actress or even the character. I just thought her part of the story was meaningless.
Yeah.
It was disappointing. I liked that she was showing Finn what the Resistance is about and what they're fighting for. I thought that was great. But their whole Canto Bight stuff, it took away from the main story for me. And then in the end, it was all meaningless. They accomplished nothing. And they dispatched with a really great character who I wanted more from in Captain Phasma.
Yeah.
The whole thing, their whole storyline bothered me. The fact that they found this code breaker and they found DJ, another really fine actor, his whole role is kind of a wash. Like, none of it mattered.
Yeah.
That's what I had a problem with. And I think that Kelly Marie Tran, I was hoping, would get a better role, a more meaningful role in Rise of Skywalker.
Speaking of that, and I think that when I brought this to your attention, this is kind of where it all came from. And let me preface this by saying I thought Kelly Marie Tran did a great job every time she was on screen. I don't have any issues with women in Star Wars. Carrie Fisher, hello.
We're not the misogynist pigs.
Yeah, I mean, it's Leia, and I love Rey. I mean, give me more Rey and Ahsoka, even though she's not really real, I guess. I don't care who's in there. It's a big enough galaxy for everybody. But anyway, so when Rian Johnson on The Last Jedi, there's a comment track where he was saying that he, quote, felt like, he said that in regards to Rose, quote, she felt like a character who didn't belong in a Star Wars movie, and that was what he was going for. So it's like, and especially with all of his issues with social media and stuff and fighting with the fans, fighting might be a strong word, but just, it's almost like he's a bomb thrower. He's a disruptive force. He's like trying to just, he's not trolling people because that has the wrong connotation, but, he likes to upset people and see what happens. And, hey, there's a place for that everywhere, too. I mean, it's not like that's a bad thing. But anyway, so the article I was looking at was by John Sexton at hotair.com. And he was referencing a couple of interviews from various different places. And he was saying that one of his problems was that when Finn was trying to save the remaining members of the Resistance by sacrificing himself to blow up the big gun before they get through the doors of the base and everything, and Rose stops him, that it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And her explanation was the real secret to beating the First Order was not killing the people you hate, but saving those you love. like saying that it's the equivalent of the whole make love not war idea. And Finn was actually trying to save the fighters who were about to be killed, but the only reason that everybody didn't die because of what Rose did is because Luke came in and saved the day and ended up giving his life instead for it. It didn't make a lot of sense in that regard. And then you also had the whole sacrifice of Admiral Holdo, saving everybody by sacrificing herself, which completely negates the idea of let's not kill the people we hate to save the people we love. Let's save the people we love even if it gets us all killed. It doesn't make any sense.
I hadn't thought of it that way. That is interesting to point that out, that you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like John Sexton said, the awkward kiss that Rose gives Finn seems to emphasize this when they're back on Crate. So her awkward kiss basically makes it seem like this is what she's really all about. She's got a thing for him. And while, she didn't want him to die because while he's off trying to do something noble, she's daydreaming about a boyfriend kind of thing. And that's a harsh way to put it. But it seemed self-serving for her to do that, especially when so much of what the Rebels were about was self-sacrifice. I mean, look at Rogue One. Hello, everybody dies, damn it. Because that's what the Rebels were. They were cannon fodder, and they knew it. And they were okay with it because they believed in the cause. And so it kind of goes against that whole idea, which makes...
That's excellent.
Which makes no sense if you look at the beginning of The Last Jedi and the sacrifices that Rose made personally and in losing her sister and the things that she said to Finn when she caught him trying to run away. I mean, it just... I don't know. It seemed disjointed to me, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think it's a good point. And I get why a lot of people are upset that Rose Tico, we didn't see more from her, because I think she deserved more. But I will say this, and this makes me sound probably colder than I would like it to. I almost didn't care that I didn't have more of her in this. I mean, there are so many characters to take care of in this story. So many, because we're talking about characters that were introduced in the original trilogy, in the prequel trilogy to some degree, because that's where Palpatine was definitely a lot more fleshed out as a character. And you're also tying up loose ends with the new sequel trilogy, which introduced us to a lot of new characters. I almost didn't need more story from other characters. I wanted to know what happened to the ones that I cared the most about. And frankly, I didn't care about Rose. And it's not because Kelly Marie Tran did a poor job. She did a fantastic job. She worked with the material she had. It's just that material was somewhat irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter that much.
And that's the thing. Like, everybody makes such a big deal out of trying to make statements with movies. I don't go to movies to get a statement thrown at me. I just want it to be entertaining, and I want it to make sense. That's it. That's all I care about.
That's why people love Star Wars so much. You can call it mindless entertainment. I don't believe it to be that. But if you're going just to enjoy yourself and not worry about a whole bunch of divisive thoughts that might be there, that's one of the nice things about Star Wars is it brought so many of us together. And it's one of the most disappointing things that in this day and age, and be it Russian trolls, what have you, people focusing in on the things that divide us. One of the great things that helped bring us together, if you look at the time frame of when Star Wars was originally introduced back in the 70s, this is a time where people are coming off of a president being impeached potentially with Richard Nixon. You have Vietnam. George Lucas has said frankly that there were tropes introduced in Star Wars that did address those things going on at the time. However, it was done in a way that wasn't divisive. It was done in a way that this is going to be a really good time. Let's go ahead and have fun.
It wasn't preachy.
Yeah, it wasn't preachy. It was like there's good guys, there's bad guys, and it's all clearly there for you. There's nothing subversive about that. There's nothing you have to figure out. Let's just lay the groundwork so you can just sit back and enjoy yourself and have fun with the story. But today, we love this meta thinking where we want things to be self-aware, self-actualized. And that, you know what, Star Wars has to evolve. It has to adapt to the modern times if it's going to stay relevant. But at the same time, what we loved about Star Wars is that you didn't have to find out what was the deeper meaning. You could talk about what was going to happen next or what things meant, but it wasn't done in a way where it was like, what's the social commentary on this?
Yeah.
Well, does this refer to me too? What is this? And I'm not trying to take away from the importance of those issues.
Oh, of course not.
But it's nice to just relax and have a good time at a movie.
That stuff doesn't have to pervade every piece of your life.
Right. And there are important things that do need to be addressed.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I just want to think the universe is a good place and the good guys win.
Yeah.
Is that so wrong?
No, absolutely not. It's kind of like the whole Star Trek way of doing things, where it was all a utopia, even though that was unrealistic. You know, Star Wars sort of went the other way. And I like that about it. That's part of why I think The Mandalorian's as successful as it is.
I liked that too. It was just a nice way. So I love the utopian aspect of Star Trek. I'm a big sci-fi fan overall. I'm not a Star Trek versus Star Wars person. I like it all. But for Star Wars, I love that the good guys are clearly good guys. The bad guys are clearly bad guys. And oh, guess what? Even the bad guys can be redeemed. Well, at least the important ones.
Yeah, and no one's ever really dead.
Yeah. If you come from the Skywalker bloodline, you can be redeemed.
Pretty much that's what it comes down to. And I'm good with that. I don't care. It doesn't have to make sense. It's fun and I enjoy it. And that's all I care about.
Finally, now that we've got into that, let's go and talk about our friends at the official Star Wars fan club group on Facebook. They posted a very interesting poll question. George Lucas stated that Palpatine was dead as shown in The Return of the Jedi. One of the major issues many had with bringing back Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker was that he was dead and was only brought back as a way to get more people to watch it, since this trilogy has not lived up to many expectations. Now, this is what they posted. About 2/3 of those who voted were overwhelmingly in support of the move to bring back the Emperor and thought it was a cool thing to do. About 1/3 didn't care for that thought. So, again, 2/3 liked bringing the Emperor back. I know that we talked about this last week, but I really loved bringing the Emperor back because I like this concept that the Emperor really has been the big bad character since the beginning. We saw that there was no mention of him, basically. At least there was no appearance by him in the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, Episode 4. Briefly in Episode 5 for Empire Strikes Back. And then we get a lot of them in Return of the Jedi. But then when you go into the prequels, this fleshes out his backstory to a great degree in what he did to come to power. We don't see much of what brought him to be as a Sith Lord. For that, I would encourage you again, read Darth Plagueis, because that novel really, really does a great job of outlining that. Not only that, but also gives you some backstory on Darth Maul and how that whole relationship came to be. And then you also learn why Plagueis was referred to as Plagueis the Wise, which was actually come up by Palpatine. He gave him that name. And this whole concept of living beyond what you are meant to in a natural order of things.
Yep.
That concept plays into Darth Plagueis' efforts, plays into Rise of Skywalker, and the fact that Palpatine was so focused on eternal life and moving on. So that really does help lay the groundwork for this. And apparently, in the JJ cut that's rumored to exist, there was more details given about how Palpatine came to be where he is.
Well, did you hear that they were talking about the fact that maybe Matt Smith had meant to be playing a young Palpatine?
Yes.
I love Matt Smith. That would have been epic.
Yes.
I don't know if it's true or not, but, you know.
Well, it would have been phenomenal, and apparently that is what they're talking about. They're referencing that was an issue that was cut. And be it for time, be it for what have you, they should have just made this 2 movies. I will say it again. We talked about last week. This should have been made into 2 movies. A lot of other franchises have done it now at this point. It's not all that uncommon. And for God's sake, it's Star Wars. I don't know if it's because Solo didn't do as well as they had hoped, but again, that whole production was riddled with issues that were not just about Star Wars fans.
No, not at all.
It didn't make as much. People didn't go to as much, but there was still this whole rift that existed for people who were disenchanted with what happened in Episode 8. The fandom was fairly split at that point. You got additional costs involved with that whole production, with firing the directors, and is it going to be good? It can't be that good if they fired the directors, didn't like what it was. Oh my gosh, we have to pay double the amount for this film because we're reshooting it almost entirely. All that stuff came into play. And also, it was marketed really poorly.
I mean, did it make money? Did they make more than they spent? I don't remember.
That's a good question. I don't know if it actually made money. I think it did.
Ultimately, that is all that matters.
Yeah,
right?
But it wasn't the success it was.
Well, sure. I mean,
hope to be.
You know, and I'm sure that they will always have movies where they say, hey, I wish this would have made more money. This could have done better. Why didn't it? I mean, Rise of Skywalker is probably going to have that same discussion, even though I'm sure it will hit the $1 billion club. So
it will, and it's on track to do that. However, it is the lowest performing of the sequel trilogy era of those 3 films, which is kind of a bummer to me. I really had hoped that the fandom would bounce back and show Disney that this is the type of Star Wars that we really enjoy. We want to see the good guys winning.
I think that we get trapped too much in this idea of that being the measure of success. And as a business, obviously, making the money is the measure of success. But I think that we set our bar too high. You know, only 46 movies ever have hit the $1 billion mark. Hello? How many movies are made every year? And that includes all of Bollywood and everybody else. I mean, it's just not, I mean, that's a huge deal.
It's an impressive mark to hit.
Yeah, I mean, if you hit $1 billion worldwide, that's nothing to be upset about, period, no matter what the fan reaction is, because obviously enough people liked it to go see it. We don't need to have every movie hit that ridiculous number to be a success, I guess, is what I would say to Disney.
Jake, you're a very logical man. It's one of the reasons I enjoy talking to you about this stuff, because it makes sense,
Thank you,
my
sir.
friend. Yes. So we'll see how this plays out. Perhaps it does eclipse The Last Jedi. We'll see. But right now it's tracking a little lower than what The Last Jedi did at this point. However, there was a bigger drop-off in the weeks following for The Last Jedi versus The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker has held on to more of that audience, not by a huge amount, but it has held a little stronger than The Last Jedi did. So that could be a sign of perhaps longer performing.
Yeah.
And maybe it equates into crossing that mark and actually beating The Last Jedi. I don't think it's going to by box office estimates. However, it
Probably
is
not.
possible, because you never know what's going to happen. So there's also things to think about, too, that Rise of Skywalker hit right at Christmas time, whereas there was a little extra time before Christmas hit for The Last Jedi, because that hit about, I think, a week earlier and gave people more time before Christmas hit. So there's that as well.
Well, and I remember Force Awakens was huge, and of course that was coming off of a big hiatus, but it also debuted on the 15th of December, so it did give them a full 10 days of time, which makes a difference.
It does.
So
it does.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on the economics of movies, other than being a fan and not being an idiot. But other than that, that's about the extent of my qualifications. But
you won't claim to, but I'll claim it. I'm an expert on this. That it's not true, but I'll claim it regardless.
that's the trick, my friend, making it seem like you know what you're talking about, even if you might not. I'm good at that.
Well, you know what? Getting back to that question, the poll question they posed, 2/3 of people liked the return of Palpatine. I liked it. I thought it was great, and solely for this reason. He was the bad guy from the start. Even though Vader is what started all, chronologically, release order-wise, Vader's the one that was the big bad to start and continued that way. There was always a bigger evil at work. And if you look at how that all is done, it was Palpatine who was sowing the seeds that became Vader, not Vader. Not Anakin Skywalker. So I love that if you're talking about the Skywalker Saga and how it all comes to an end, who is the guy that initiated the Skywalker Saga? Palpatine. And from the comics, we're led to believe that he even made Anakin Skywalker come into existence by manipulating the midichlorians to create life in his mother Shmi. So
did you not see the tweet that came out last week about that?
No, I didn't. What was
From
it?
the comic writer?
No.
I can't remember his name. I'd have to look it up. But he basically said, this is being misinterpreted. Palpatine did not create Skywalker. That's it.
Well, then there you go.
I know.
So, Jake, I did not know about that tweet, but that is interesting. It's actually Matt Martin from Lucasfilm Story Group. I just looked it up as you were talking about it.
Gotcha.
And Matt Martin from Story Group at Lucasfilm is the one saying that that is not the intent of what we saw in the comic book. Whether the comic book writer intended that, I don't know. I haven't seen him respond to this. But Matt Martin is saying that is not the intent. Palpatine did not create Anakin, but still at the same time, he is the one. Palpatine is the one who sowed the seeds of Anakin's turn to the dark side. He manipulated him, and so that is the guy that initiated everything. So for me, I'm thinking he absolutely should be the one to be at the very end of this story and the main evil to defeat.
Yeah. Well, he didn't make Anakin Skywalker, but he very, very much made Darth Vader, period.
Absolutely.
And that's really what it comes down to. And none of this, to me, is controversial at all, because if you do as much reading in the EU as I do, and you read about where all this background is with the Sith and the old Republic time, and even before then, the Sith were all about longevity, because they would spend decades making plans to get into power and kill their enemies and do all this sneaky behind the scenes crap. Okay, if you're going to spend most of your normal lifespan doing all that, why would you want to give it up once it finally works? And for people like Sheev Palpatine from Naboo, who's a human, obviously his lifespan is relatively short. I mean, 150 or so, if we are to believe some of the things they talk about in the EU with humans. He's not going to want to give that up. And even at the Aftermath trilogy, the one that came out right after Force Awakens, that talked about the time around there, he has a plan, and they even talk about it in there, about how he's starting something. And Gallius Rax, he recruits young Galli, an orphan, on Jakku. Yeah, so he builds this thing on Jakku, and he's like looking for younglings, and he's getting things going, and he's a plotter. He's the master manipulator, and it's a huge plan that took him most of his life to come to fruition. and he didn't foresee Anakin coming, but once he saw Anakin come, he was like, I can use this. And that's what Sith do. They use people. So none of this has a lack of sense to me. It makes total sense. He's not going to just disappear. It's not going to be easy to get rid of him because he spent his entire life planning to be around forever, and he's really good at it.
No doubt about that. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this week, and thank you so much for joining us. We always love the fact that we are sharing our love of Star Wars with you on whatever continent you may be. We appreciate you from various countries, Australia, Norway, and our friends in Canada. We've got
some in Hong Kong.
We got Hong Kong, that's
hello
right.
To Hong Kong.
Yeah, hello to you, and also down in, South America. So it's just so cool to see that.
All over the place.
You guys are sharing this journey with us. We love it. So please make sure you join us again next week with new episodes of the Force Geeks, a Star Wars podcast, dropping every Monday, usually on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, just about any place you can get podcasts from. We're there. Another thank you to our sponsor, DailySuperhero.com, and founder Daniel Wolf. We love it when he joins us. He is right now, I know, having a very good time taking in Galaxy's Edge at Disney World. So jealous of that. We also appreciate any kind of reviews that you, the listener, might want to share with us. You can provide us with that. Those 5-star reviews are nice. Writing something nice is great because people pay attention to those things. So if you want to support us and get more people to join us in the conversation, we can do some more cool stuff. We can upgrade our equipment perhaps at some point when we're making more money. So that'd be great. And feel free to hit us up with your emails at theforcegeeks@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, so follow us at The Force Geeks, and on Facebook, just search The Force Geeks. And remember,